All right, welcome back to the Dirty Hands of the Republic. I'm Tom Nixon. That's my partner, Joe Fenwick. And today with us is Sergeant Rob Clasen, who's retired from the police department. You retired in 2021, correct?
2020.
2020, all right. And that was after a Facebook post, if I recall correctly.
Yes.
And so you were with the department 23 years or
25 years.
25 years. And
25.
I think you and I met on night shift in 17 District back in 1996.
Yes.
Okay. And I think you were in 17 E10's beat.
17 Edward 11 nights.
Yeah, and I was 17 Edward 34 nights.
Yeah.
But nothing ever happened in 30's beat, so I was always in 10's beat.
That's because they had, crappy cops over there.
So
I'm kidding. 17 E10's beat by volume is one at that time, and still probably true today, is one of the highest volume districts and beats in the city, if not the highest.
Yeah, it was incredible to work there. And just for the audience's edification, that's Southwest Houston. It's near Bel Air. Hillcroft is like the epicenter of 17 District.
It's the Gulfston area.
Yeah, and then it goes from like Chimney Rock at 59 all the way to Stafford.
Beltway, and then all the way to Stafford. And then if you go south, it goes all the way to Highway 90.
Right. Okay. And that was, so we're talking about the north part of 17 District, which would be
the Gulfston area.
Yeah, north of Braeswood, north of like
Braeswood.
Yeah. And,
up to the freeway, up to 59 to 610.
Yeah. And that was incredibly busy.
Yeah.
I never saw more open homicide.
Well, at the time, Tom, if you remember, back, there was the crack wars were coming to an end. Also, what we did...
Wars. You meant crack wars or crack whores?
Crack wars.
Okay, crack wars. Got it.
I don't want to be, vile, but... Okay, also, what was going on was, you remember the civil wars down in Honduras and Nicaragua?
Yeah.
And those guys came here. They were young soldiers. They came here. They just kept the fight up.
Yeah.
And a lot of those were retaliatory. And then, of course, you had MS-13 and the Cholos and everyone fighting for ground. And when we came in, it was still very violent. In fact, I remember, as morbid as it is, we used to bet on you probably remember this, on what street the homicide was going to occur on. If you did, you didn't have to buy breakfast. And there was going to be a homicide quite a bit, and there were quite a few of them. It was very violent.
I remember the first one I ever worked, I was still on probation, and it was off Fenwick. Mm-hmm. And the guy stabbed somebody in the... One guy stabbed another guy in the chest over a case of beer, allegedly.
Yeah.
And it was with a pocket knife about, 6 inches long, but the blade itself was only like 3 inches long. And somehow he caught him in the heart, and the guy bled to death right there in the parking lot.
Yeah.
Off of Fenwick, and then he ran down, and we caught him in his apartment on the south side of Bel Air. I want to say off Rampart is what it was.
And then remember too, the Asian gangs were also very active. Remember they shot up the Roadrunner there, had 7 people in the lobby, 4 outside and 3 inside the lobby dead.
Yeah.
And they were and I always said the black guys and the Hispanic guys would do drive-bys. The Asian guys would do park and shoots. They would pull up, walk in, shoot everybody in the house and leave. They were more into park and shoots than they were drive-bys. But they only had a couple of instances with that. They kind of kept it on their side, and they were always on the down low and didn't really involve the police a lot.
How long were you there in 17 District?
Actually, I was there 3 years, and then I went to Shepherd for 11, and then I promoted in 2010, came back to Southwest, not to Fondren, but not to Gessner, but to, we call it, used to be called the Braverman Storefront, then it was Fondren, and now it's Gessner because it's on Gessner in, I can't remember the straight now. But, I promoted, and then I did 11 years at Shepherd, and I came back, and I was a sergeant in 17 District for over 10 years.
Okay. Just as a side note, I grew up in 17 District.
Yeah.
It was kind of, and you think you know a place when you grow up there. And I learned very quickly, you have no earthly idea where you live until you...
because you lived in the Lily White area, not the area that really mattered.
But I grew up in 17E30's beat. Mm-hmm. But when I became when I became a police officer, I was like, holy cow, I had no earthly idea how bad the part of town I lived in was. I was like, I got to tell my parents to get out of here. So I went home one night and I was like, Mom, Dad, you got to leave now. They're at the gates. They're coming. Quickly go.
Pack up and leave.
Yeah.
And they did. They moved out to Katy. But long story short, I think I wound up going to SO from Special Operations from 17 District. But do you ever miss it?
Miss what?
17 district?
No, I have I actually work at a graphic shop, and I invested in a graphic shop and auto upholstery shop there. So I'm right there at Evergreen and Hillcroft at Space City Graphics. At the graphic shop is at 6909 Ashcroft, and Seats Unlimited is at 6208 Evergreen. So I'm right there in the Gulfton every day, 5 days a week, sometimes 6.
Okay, so you and just so the audience knows, you now, I think you engrave Glock pistols now, don't you?
I do we do all kind of engraving. If you go to Space City Graphics LLC at gmail.com, or if you go to Space City Graphics LLC on Instagram, you'll see all our work.
Okay.
We're also on Facebook. It's really cool stuff.
Can you do any pistol, or is it just Glocks?
We can do any pistol. We can do wallets. We can do T-shirts, banners, anything a laser can go across, we can, except fake leather. Fake leather and plastic kind of...
it melts?
It melts, yeah. Okay. But we can do anything to a degree. We can put initials on wallets, belts, boots, hats. Anything with leather we can do. We can do metal.
Okay.
And it's really cool. And we also do embroidering. We do car wraps, lights. If you're a police officer and you need your car wrapped and you want police lights on it and you want the ghost flames, we do all that.
Okay, that sounds cool.
It's really good.
What kind of lasers do you use?
It's a, oh golly, I can't think of the name right now.
CO2 laser or?
It's not a CO2 laser, it's an electric laser.
Oh, okay.
And it's really cool. And it's really cool. And like I say, if you want banners or anything, we do it all.
Okay, very cool. So question, what did you find the most interesting part of your career at the Houston Police Department was? When would you say, if you could go back and relive any part of your career, which part would that be?
The most interesting part, I would say my first 3 years. Well, I trained at Northeast back when it was called The Rock. And interesting, I worked with guys that were there from the 70s. And let's just say their policing style was not in line with society's norms today.
It was a wee bit different.
It was a wee bit different.
Yeah, I worked Northeast too.
I worked Northeast with barrel-chested men with steel guns, and they didn't care what they said or what they did. And I enjoyed it so much, I knew I had to leave there to save my career. So but those were good guys, and I learned a lot from them. I was taught by a guy named Larry Baker, and he was a gentleman. And he said, always start off with sir. You can get one line he told me was, you can start with sir and get to MFer, but you'll never start with MFer and get to sir. So be as nice as people let you.
Okay.
And I took that to heart. But yeah, Northeast was an eye-opener. I remember just the horror stories, I remember one day going down Jensen, they said they had a guy with a gun, and we're driving down Jensen, down the wood line, and I think it was Jensen driving 17 with J.R. Knott, the old big guy at the top shop.
Oh, yeah.
And a guy came out and shot a shotgun at the car. I put my head down, stepped on the gas, got about a half mile, turned around, and I don't even think we charged the guy. He's some old crazy guy with a shotgun, But
you caught him?
Yeah, he just ran they call everybody. You call K9 and all that stuff, and they went in there, and I think SWAT came and they got him out. That was like my 4th day on the job on day shift. I took extra pants that day for a reason. I knew I had a reason.
And they didn't.
But the Northeast was fun. It was. They
didn't charge him with attempted capital murder.
I don't know what they charged him with.
Criminal mischief.
They did. I was a rookie, and Jr. had to go somewhere, and I did get the call. So. That wasn't our call. We were just driving by. So
okay.
Checking by.
I got it.
But Northeast was quite an experience, and I will say this: it wasn't as violent as everybody made it out to be. But I can say now I'm retired. I remember one letter I wrote. I started to read it, and my trainer, I'm going to leave names out of most of these because I'm not sure statute of limitations have faltered yet. But I said, I grabbed the letter to read. He said, with a chaw in his mouth, I didn't say read it. I said sign it. And me being a dumb rookie, Little did I know I was paying off his car note. I didn't know. But yeah, and that happened several times. And I remember always going back to the thing and said, this is what happened. And we all agree that's what happened, and that's just not the way to do things.
Yeah, it was different.
It was different son.
Different time.
But I'm glad those days are gone. That old guard changed. And let me say, I'm glad that guard changed. There was no room for that kind of policing. And,
do you ever think that type of policing was necessary, though?
Sometimes. Sometimes you have to meet force with force, but I will tell you this. We arrested a guy for auto theft. And he's in a stolen car. Okay, he's in a stolen car. And I was day shift. I'm going to do the case. And this one officer, I don't even know who he was. Like I say, I was day shift. That was, we did things evenings and nights. And he put the cuff on so tight, the other cuff was standing up by itself, And I was riding with, again, when it's good things, I'll mention good officers. When it's not, I won't.
Okay.
But this guy's name was Larry Baker. And if you know Northeast, everybody knows Larry the Legend.
I rode with Larry.
And most of the time I didn't know how Larry looked because most of the day he was doing this with his face, like this when it came to me key mapping. But Larry pulled over and said, "Get that guy's cuff off. There's no reason to treat him like that." And I said, "Sir, I didn't put these cuffs on. I'm sorry." And I took the cuff off, put them on right, and the guy was nice as could be. And we went on about our business. And there I learned that, it's always better to be as professionally and as kind as people will let you. And that was my saying to people. I would say, I'm going to be as nice to you as you let me be. If you let me be nice to you, I'm going to be nice to you as nice as I can.
Did you ever do any training at HPD? By that I mean, were you ever like a field trainer?
No, but I was a quasi trainer. People ask me all the time, but I didn't want that interfering with my fun. So I said, no, I don't want to do that. Okay. I don't want to train people to do the fun.
I just remember that when I was there, the big deal was you got a take-home car.
Yeah. Now it's back to that, and trainers actually have a pretty good gig right now.
Oh, they do?
Oh, yeah. They get a little more money. I think they're getting take-home cars. I don't want to quote me on that, but a trainer probably makes, and everything said and done, probably about $5,000 or $6,000 extra a year being a trainer.
So what made you want to go to 17 District after that? Or did you just go to the orientation after your probation?
After that, well, my cousin worked at Beechnut.
Okay.
And then I figured, I realized that my cousin, like every other veteran officer, didn't like rookies. And I thought we'd hang out together, but that wasn't the case. In fact, go get your own car and leave me alone,
Is that when
did that? I went to Beechnut.
Okay, is that when you started riding with Kelly Huey? Or?
I went and started riding with Officer Kelly Huey, and he was in 15 District. And here's something funny about policing back then, is rookies do all the work. It was like, well, let the rookies do it, right? LTR, let the rookies do it. So Kelly, I was in 16E20s beat, and Kelly's in 15E30s beat. Well, they joined up at Maine. And I would always check by with Kelly Huey, and we would ride together, and he's late side and I was early side, but we still would talk to sergeants into letting us ride together. And then we decided, hey, why don't we go to 17 District? Because I always heard El Camino del Rey.
Oh, yeah.
That road, El Camino del Rey. Yeah, El Camino del Rey. Yeah, that street. I said, and there'd be like 10 calls holding there every night, and I said, I got to go see this street. So we drove over there and found it. And I said, man, 17 District's where we want to be. So we went over and we told, the fact is, retired Chief Dobbins was the desk sergeant then, him in Vandenbergen. And we said, we want to ride. They go, well, we only got one open unit. I said, well, how many two-man units you have? He said, we don't have any. I said, well, let us ride two-man. So we were 1711, and a couple of my classmates were over there, and we wolf-packed, and we just had the best time, And then one of us left, and then the other one left, and then Kelly moved on to North Shepherd. And I said, well, I want to go to North Shepherd too. And again, we got to North Shepherd. They said, well, there's only one spot on nights. And I said, and here's something else you don't know, folks. Patrol is always short. There are never enough patrol officers in any station. So we said, well, we want to work night shift. And they said, well, there ain't no night shift opening. So well, we'll just stay at 17 District. And I think Thursday, Friday was open. And they said, no, don't leave. Y'all can ride two-man. 6-boy 23, so we rode that. Kelly was 21, I was 23, but we rode together, and we probably rode off and on for about 8 years, and then we went our separate ways. Patrol outgrows each other.
Yeah. But then you got promoted, correct?
No, I stayed at Shepherd a couple, 3 more years, or 7 more. I stayed Shepherd. I rode in 2015, so I was there 11 years almost to the day when I promoted.
Okay.
And then I moved on to, I went back to Beechnut and made people mad there. And can I say something to the sergeants?
Sure, go ahead. Yeah.
Sergeants, when I left, I'll tell you a story at Beechnut. They used to go crying every night to my cousin how hard I was on them and how hard I was on the lazy officers and the officers that didn't want to work. And they threatened to blow up my cousin's car if I came back. And my joke is they had a going away party for me, but I wasn't invited. But I went with it, and I didn't care. I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to make officers better. As a sergeant, that's what you want to do. You want to make officers better. No matter where they are in their career as a supervisor, you want to make those officers better. So I left, and then I left in April to go kicking and screaming and dragging to the Southeast Jail nights. I did a year there. That's where you learn how to be a sergeant at Southeast Jail. You'll see what sergeanting is all about. You get to deal with civilians, not officers. But I stood in for Sergeant Ken Kincaid when they called the roll call. My uncle, little side note, my uncle was a retired sergeant in Wichita PD. Well, Ken Kincaid came from Wichita, and he was my uncle's friend, and I said, hey, I'll go stand in for Ken, and I did. Well, while I was at the ceremony during police week, a couple of beachnet officers approached me, and they said, hey, Rob, hey, Sarge, how you doing? And I said, I'm good. And they said, man, we miss you over there. I said, with every bullet so far, right? And they said, no. They said, you held officers accountable, and you didn't play favorites, and you even made the lazy officers work. And sergeants, there's 3 things my officers told me when I left. I never played favorites, even though I did have favorite officers. I ain't gonna lie, I had favorite officers that I liked better than other officers, but I never played favorites with them. Number 2, they always knew my leadership stance. I never wavered in my leadership. What I believed is what I believed, and what I said is what I said, and they could always expect the same thing. And the other thing is I always tried to help the officers within the parameters of the law and policy. Like an officer ran into a pole, that was shop damage. If an officer backed into a curb and blew out a tire, that was shop damage.
Oh, you didn't do a collision report?
No, I did not. Because according to the accident, it's not an accident until I say it's an accident.
Right.
And one day, a lieutenant came out, and we were deciding on how to fix this shop damage. And he was the admin lieutenant. And I excused the officers. I said, hey, you two go inside, the fleet coordinator and the driver, and I said, you two go inside. Me and Lieutenant got to talk. And I said, LT, he's a commander now, real nice guy, great lieutenant, great guy. And I said, what's the problem here? And he goes, well, that's a crash. I said, ain't crash till I say it's a crash, and you're the admin lieutenant. This is a sergeant business. This ain't lieutenant business. I'm going to go ahead, Mr. Lee, slap 2 doors on that. I said, we blow up cars every day. There's 2 doors waiting on us down there at Westside. We're going to have them sticked on there. And by Wednesday, you won't let this car look brand new. He said, okay. The fleet coordinator come out and said, Sarge, are you getting in trouble? I said, no, sometimes you just got to remind these lieutenants who daddy is. But Lieutenant was cool with it. He said, just get the car fixed, So we got the car fixed. But yeah, always try to help your officers. And I'll say one thing. I always say this too, as people, there's only one thing we do once, and that's lose our virginity. So when you catch an officer that hasn't done a report, well, don't let him slide on that report, because there's probably 10 reports he hasn't done. So call him on that one and save his career. You're an officer doing something wrong, correct him on the spot. Who cares if he gets days off? You're going to save his career in the long run, maybe his life. So don't play favorites. Don't waver in your leadership, and try to help your officers out as much as possible.
So one of the things that surprised me on night shift, well, just as a police officer in general, was how quickly you could paralyze a department by flattening the tires of its patrol cars.
Yeah.
Like when we were at, I think it was JoJo's one night.
JoJo's,
during the rodeo.
The great tire debacle.
And some drunk asshole flattened the tires on 4 patrol cars.
4 patrol cars, 5 officers.
Yeah. And it took, 4 hours to get replacement tires, or 5 hours, I think it was.
Yeah, and then Captain Bullock was our captain. Anybody knew Captain Bullock? He was not a nice man. In fact, one of the saving graces of my life is he did all that work, saved all that money, worked all that time, got all that drop built up, and he died about 45 days after he's retired. There is a God. God's watching.
About that in another. We talked about that in another
Bullock
video.
Was there, and he charged us. In fact, he got us for too many cars at a location. There was about 5 constable cars there, about 10 patrol cars, and a couple sergeants and a captain and a lieutenant came in and waved at us. Did I snitch? No, I took my lumps. And he tried to get officers for untruthfulness, for calling out the wrong place, and all kinds of stuff. And it was really sad.
I was one of those officers. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you beat the untruthfulness?
Yeah. Well, the arbitrator threw everything out when I appealed.
In fact, one of the funniest things I said, they would say, "Hey, man, what's going on with those tires?" And I would say, "Man, they're trying to fire us over tires." And Fate is a written reprimand. And he goes, everyone's like, "Fine to fire you." I said, "No, man, they're not." And Kelly was riding with me then. He goes, "Rob, when are you going to stop saying that?" I said, when people stop crapping their pants over it, I'll stop saying it. But yeah, it was funny. And I remember a truck came in, And he stopped and he looked at me. I had forgotten my wallet. And I go out to the car and I look at him and I go, man, that dude ain't right. But I don't know if it was him or not, but he just stared at me and I was like, nothing. And I don't know if that was that guy or not, but I always thought, the back of my hair stood up.
Yeah.
Probably him.
But
so I just thought it was interesting that one of the, if I was ever going to write a screenplay for a movie and I wanted to paralyze a police department, I wouldn't do any like really sinister terrorist act or anything like that. I would just get 4 guys with pocket knives and go flatten every tire on every patrol car they could find, and you would literally paralyze a department.
That and take away the MDTs. Try to get an officer to write something down.
Yeah, and I just thought that was kind of an interesting introduction into how fragile some things at the police department were as far as logistics and how the department reacts to it and how they overreact to discipline.
I was going to say they overreact a lot too, but the most interesting thing I thought about policing is how so many people from so many different walks of life can come together and actually do policing.
Well, the same as in the military. I mean,
exactly.
In the Army,
it's interesting that there's so many different views of what should be done as policing and, how different officers act. I mean, you can go and you'll see officers that work their whole career never get a complaint. You got other officers that really don't do anything. The one time they do decide to do something, they get complained on. So it's interesting how that works.
And another thing I learned when I was at night shift in 17 District is it really helps when you are with officers who have the right motivation, the right psychological mindset.
Exactly.
And a perfect example was one night when we were coming back from eating and we were heading back to 17E 20s beat or 30s beat. And Mike Perez saw an apartment on fire.
Yes.
And it turned out the fire was growing to the entire building. And he started kicking in doors. And because he did it, then I was like, oh, well, I'm going to do it too. And then I think you and Kelly Huey had come from the opposite side, and y'all were kicking in the doors on the opposite side.
Was that the night you seen your ballet slipper? No.
And
I hadn't heard that story.
Yes, I remember that.
Yeah, and we were all kicking doors in and pulling people out before this. And it was amazing how fast an apartment building can catch on fire. That's not something you can't really conceptualize it unless you witness it. Yeah. Is how fast an apartment building can just erupt in flames.
I remember.
Where was it?
It was on, I want to say it was in the 5600 block of Beach Nut.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it was probably the roaches that were on fire running.
I remember one time Kelly and Mike were working an extra job, and Joe Lopez and I checked by, and we were on overtime, 6:55, and smoke was filling up in this apartment. And Mike said, "Hey Kelly," and we run in there, and a young black man fell asleep boiling a hot dog, and his entire apartment was engulfed in smoke from this hot dog that he left boiling and fell asleep. And we pulled him out, and he's not breathing. He's just, well, I'm not doing mouth to mouth on anybody that ain't at least a 7.5, right? So they're there, and I'm saying, "Hey, man," so I said, "I'll pump on him a little bit." So I pump on him, and he starts coughing, and we give him some water. And I don't know what happened to that young man, but I can tell you what, I sleep good at night knowing that I didn't have to tell his family he died boiling a hot dog.
No, that's true.
Hopefully he died. Hopefully he's still alive and thriving, and hopefully he took that he was real thankful for us. And he said, "Sir, I'm sorry, I just fell asleep." I said, "Brother, we already got the hot dog out, I grabbed the pan and, I was choking on it too. It was just a hot dog. And it had just started heating and smoking, and I said, we got the fire out, got the pan out, and got it outside and called an ambulance for him. He was fine, but he didn't die from a hot dog,
I'm not kissing on him. No.
Now, so one of the other things that we've discussed on our channel is, the Pareto rule, which is the 80-20 rule in most organizations. 80% of the work is done by 20% of the officers or 20% of the personnel in it. And I kind of think it applies in almost every aspect of law enforcement, specifically officers' willingness to use deadly force, officers' willingness to get into a physical confrontation with a violent suspect. And I think it's something that we're all becoming aware of because of the Uvalde video that's coming out now with the officers who were reluctant to get in and use deadly force. What is your perception about officers who are reluctant to use force against suspects?
A lot of things are involved there. One, officers don't want to get in trouble. Number two, and you say that, I remember I dated an officer, well, I use that term loosely, but she told me that one time. She said, this is like 90, 91. She said, 80% of the work is done by 20% of the officers. And that's true. And that was even before I got on. Then I got on 95. And I tell you, I went to Beach Nut. And when those night shift officers found out that they had a rookie that would work, they quit working. I was filling up work card and a half every night, and they weren't doing anything.
Yeah.
They were sitting there. So yeah, that's part of it. Part of it is I don't want to get hurt. I don't want to get in trouble. A lot of them just can't do it. And I have many talks at roll call. I said, look, there is no shame in not being able to kill somebody. There's no shame in not being able to visit violence upon someone with nightsticks and flashlights and things like that. I said, there's no shame in not being able to do that. The shame is pretending that you will be doing that and you walk around here with a gun and badge on. If you're not able to do that, go get you an admin job. Tell them that you're not capable of that and don't work extra jobs. That's what should happen. But I think it's more like, I would say 25% of this department cannot visit violence upon people. And there's several reasons. One, they just can't do it. They're scared. The other thing is they don't want to get in trouble.
So how many officers would you say are paralyzed by the fear of, quote unquote, getting in trouble?
It all depends on the situation.
Well, in general, I mean, like on a day-to-day basis, for example.
What you talked about, nobody ever got in trouble for doing nothing. And that still holds true today.
I mean,
you can not do nothing and keep your job and you'll get a 3 on your JPR. But if you don't have aspirations of leaving patrol, that's what'll happen to you.
I can never find that on my paycheck.
Yeah, it never came up on your paycheck.
3 on my JP, same thing, isn't it? Same
but yeah,
yours, right?
He got 5s on his JPR.
I think it's paid exactly the same thing.
I tell you about JPR. My sergeant at the time, really good guy. He's retired. He said,
JPR is a performance evaluation.
Joint performance review, I think.
Yeah, joint performance review.
I never knew what it meant.
Oh.
I just knew it.
And I took it seriously because, and I'll tell you where it does matter, is when you go to, I always thought that, when you do these JPRs, I don't want to give an officer, when I got a new officer, I would say, hey, and we do the bi-monthlies, every 2 months. I would start off everybody with a 3. And I would say, I don't move these X's, you do. So whatever direction these X's move is on you, brother, not me. Effective or poor. And then you had acceptable, or
outstanding.
He had strong and outstanding, and then the other one was effective.
But serious question, because I have multiple performance evaluations in my career. Did anybody ever get in trouble for getting like a 2 or a 1?
No. Well, we have the personnel concerns division. But I remember, I'll tell you, I remember I went to, I'll say Bobby Dobbins again and Sergeant Vandenberg, and they were our 2 night shift sergeants. I said, hey, I'm doing all this work, and I'm still getting 3s and 4s. Where's my 5s? And he goes, well, as you get on the department longer, you get more experience, you get more 5s, which I thought was the most ridiculous thing in the world.
Right.
Because
seniority points.
I've seen 20-year veterans act like 5-year rookies, and I've seen 5-year rookies act like 20-year veterans. The more work you do and the dirtier you get your hands, the better officer you're going to be. But yeah, JPRs, that's your only threat. In fact, I remember Ronnie's Rangers over there. I forget the sergeant's last name.
Ronnie Blair.
Thank you.
Ronnie Blair. He told the 17E40s guys after he got kicked out of wherever he was, Ronnie Blair came here with 1740 Knights. And if you know anything about those guys, they didn't move at the speed of light. They were unmotivated officers. And he called them in and said, y'all don't do enough arm duties and y'all ain't doing this and that. And this guy, John Sally, said, what are you going to do about it? And he said, well, it's going to affect your JPR. And they said, that all you got? And they all laughed at him and got up and walked out. We don't care. That's all you got. But JPRs matter to officers that care. And back to my story. Sergeant said, hey, Rob, you're not doing enough traffic stops. Spend more of your time doing traffic in your downtime. So I said, okay. So I went out one time and I hooked up with a guy that's fixing to promote lieutenant, and we started writing tickets. And I did a ticket book a month for 6 months, right? Now, you can write 5 violations. So I was getting at least 3 on every one. And I was doing a ticket book a month. That's 20, right? 20 times 3 is 60. 60 times, we got those twice a year, right? So 20 times 6, that's, a bunch of tickets, like 1,200 ducks, plus all the arrests for getting off the traffic. I never worked so hard in my life. So I get my JPR. What does it say? Needs to do more traffic. I'll get it next time. It never changed. But I took them seriously, and I did change them because it does matter when they want to go somewhere. The divisions do look at your JPRs. That's another thing too, sergeants. Let me tell you this: when you got officers that want to go somewhere, I always told officers to get out of patrol, you have to be a good patrolman. You can't be a slack patrolman and get out of patrol. Used to be. I got a Troy Fenner story here in a minute. But I would tell my patrol officers, you give me 18 months of hard patrol work. You give me on views, you give me tickets, you give me arrests, you give me good reports. You don't show up late, you show up on time. You don't call in unless it's truly an emergency, and I'll get you out of here. So when you put your word on a bad officer, and then you got a really good officer that wants to leave, but those people looking at it, you've already given your word on that bad officer. Well, what's that going to do for the good officers? They're going to say, Sergeant Clasen lied to us last time. He's probably lying to us this time. So don't lie about trying to you got a problem officer, you got a problem sergeant. That's all there is to it. You show me crappy officers, and I'll show you crappy sergeants that's not doing their job. So if you think if you just want to ship off an officer and I was told that, we'll just give her a good review and ship her off. Well, no. That's not the way to do things. You train that officer, get them where they need to be, you tell them what you expect of them, and they'll respond because they want to get out of there. But don't put your word on a bad officer, because then when you have a good officer, they're not gonna take your word for it, and you've already given your word. Why do you want to put your word on a bad officer?
Right, okay.
Save your word for the good officer.
Well, let me ask you, what's your Troy Fenner story if you want to?
About
delve into the what is that? I guess what's your Troy Fenner story really?
Oh, Troy Fenner. We had an officer, a master's degree in psychology, 2 degrees, and I don't even know what you do with a psychology degree. Be a psychologist, but if you're not going to be a doctor, Anyway, she had a family violence third party report on family violence, domestic violence. She came in the sergeant's office 5 times in 15 minutes. I said, how did she pass training? How did she get past training? How is this possible? And she'd been on a few years. And I said, why don't you can take domestic violence, it's called a reportee, okay? It's called a reportee. The reportee is not the complainant. Reportee, complainant, witness, whatever you have, and then you do your report. There's pictures, you do pictures, whatever, domestic violence. She's working the desk. So she got through that. Not a good officer. She had attitude. She was lazy. One time she had a welfare check. Well, she's scared of dogs. She's scared of chickens. There's some chihuahuas there, and there's chickens. She's scared of that. She called a sergeant out. Sergeant said, go knock on the door. Well, an hour and 45 minutes later, that bled into evening shift. An evening shift officer had to help her clear the call on a welfare check that the guy wasn't even home. Did she go ask the neighbors? No, the guy was out of town. That's why nobody could find him. And to top it off, he's a truck driver. But his truck was there, but he's on vacation. And the neighbor knew that. She didn't bother to do that. So the sergeants come up with an idea. We're going to train her. This is a 5-year officer. We're going to train her. And I said, well, there's 2 things you can't train. You can't train brains and you can't train balls. You either have them or you don't. Now, you can train and you can learn things when you're smart. But if you're not smart, you can't learn things. And if you don't have any balls, no one will ever teach you balls. Now, I can't teach you how to be brave. You either have it in you or you don't. It's a uvality. So they're going to do all these things. Well, she didn't just pass up her sergeant. She didn't just pass up her lieutenant. She didn't pass up the captain. She didn't pass up the assistant chief. She went right to Troy Fenner, executive assistant chief, made a phone call to him, pled her case without hesitation. He didn't ask any of us what was going on. No one at South Gessner. And took her over to Bolo Street, I think it's Bolo Street, to Special Victims, and put her over there. Day shift weekends off as an investigator. Well, what happens 2 weeks later? Sergeant calls South Gessner sergeant and say, why did you send this moron over here? She doesn't do anything, she's lazy, and she doesn't come to work. And she has a bad attitude. Well, call Troy Fenner. That's a true story. She went over everybody's head to him. And instead of him saying, what the hell are you calling me for? Why are you calling me? So he ships her off to Bolo Street.
Okay, so that leads me into my next question. In the 25 years you were there, did you see a change in the caliber of officers recruited between 1995 and say 2010 and 2015?
Around 2000 we stopped hiring hard men. We stopped hiring cops and we started hiring police officers.
Around 2000?
I'd say about 2000.
What do you think changed?
I think we started getting into de-escalation and more towards the cops are doing it wrong and we need less violent police officers and we need less cops and more police officers. To a point, I agree with that. It's always, like I said again, it's always better to talk. But sooner or later, and I always used to tell my officers this too, 9% of the time you can be a police officer. Joe, you'll agree to this, but 10% of the time you have to be a cop. And you have to wear that cop on your sleeve. And it has to come out with extreme prejudice and violence, and it can happen at any time. Then when it's over, you have to put that cop back away and get back to being a police officer.
Certainly.
Well, what's going on now is they don't care about hiring cops. They only care about hiring police officers. They would rather no one do anything proactive and just take reports. They'd rather have crime reporters than crime fighters.
Is that why you think crime is up?
Well, crime's up because the DA doesn't arrest because of the Democratic judges.
Well, fair enough.
Look at how many officer-involved shootings there's been this year. We used to average, about 25 a year, right? About 25 for over the years. Now how many have we had? Because we have violent criminals that say, gee, I robbed somebody, I murdered somebody. They're not going to put me in jail. What did Rodney Ellis say? When Kim Ogg, when you got the Democrats eating each other, Kim Ogg said to Rodney Ellis, we need to hire more DAs and more deputies. Rodney Ellis's response was, that's all they're going to do is lock up more young black men, and that's going to do is lock up more young black men. Which leads me to believe that Rodney Ellis believes that the black community wants black criminals in their midst, and they don't. Nobody does. So what's the problem? Yeah, it's the leniency. It's and remember, we used to have laws to modify behavior. Well, did we not?
He's still going to get reelected. So I mean, it becomes indifferent at that point.
We used to have laws to modify behavior. Remember, it used to be a state jail felony to what? Break in a car.
Right. We
didn't have a lot of BMVs back then, right? He might have one or two a night. Now, when I left, you'd go in a parking lot and there'd be 30 BMVs. Mm-hmm. And if you actually caught the guy, they would charge him with just one BMV. So now it's a Class B misdemeanor. Well, time served. So what's the incentive to do that? In San Francisco, they actually have to prove that the car was locked before they'll take charges. Why are you going to do that? How are you going to prove that? So we used to do that. We used to modify laws to modify behavior. Now the behavior modifies the laws, right?
Right.
Look at Los Angeles. Well, if you don't steal $1,000, it's okay. And you see that what happens, stores closes and the community suffers. So that's what happens.
Was that the impetus of your Facebook post?
The Facebook post was basically absent fathers. And I actually wrote line 8 was, this applies to everybody. And it wasn't a blanket statement. And until fathers step up, policemen and jailers will always have jobs. You have these kids, right? My last murder case was a 15-year-old kid shot a 17-year-old. And part of it was you got to give them hope that there's something outside that neighborhood, something outside that 12111 Fondren. My kids grew up in Cypress with a swimming pool, computers, scooters, Disney World, a life that I can only dream of. And I still told them, girls, there's life outside of Cypress, Texas. You need to go see it. There are better things than our swimming pool with the slide and the water feature and all the great things we do here and all your trips to Disney. There's better. And if you're an absent father and you have 5 kids by 5 different moms, pick your favorite one. Just at least, you don't have to be a great dad, just be a dad. And these kids, I used to tell my suspects, where's your dad? And he would say, I don't know my dad. I said, see, it's your dad's fault. But when you have kids, it'll be your fault. So raise your kids. And you don't have to be a great dad, you just have to be a dad. You have to be there for them. And that goes for everyone. In this society, you included, Tom, and I'm guilty of it. You were too, Joe. You have kids?
Yes, sir.
Thanks. No. It's only so much of Joe Fenwick can say. No. Policemen are guilty of it the worst. A policeman will work 100 hours a week for for that boat he never floats, that camper he never camps in, and that motorcycle he never rides, and the jet ski he never floats, and you don't see your kids. So remember, it's better to do with your kids than for your kids, and you have to find that balance. But when you have an entire subculture of feral kids running around with nobody raising them but single mothers pulling their hair out, trying to make things work, trying to deal with all that, chaos amongst chaos, somewhere along the line, somebody's got to put their foot down and say, hey, this can't be this way. There's got to be a better way. And you can't just blame the cops all the time. All the training in the world will not prepare you. This is for all you guys that watch and say, the police just need more training. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to train you for a solid year. Then I'm going to lock you in a room with a 300-pound fat man that's not so fat, naked, sweaty on PCP with a knife in his hand, and I want you to go deal with it. And I guarantee you a social worker ain't going to help you. So there's only so much training we can do. And
that's the point that I made in an earlier video we were doing, where I talk about the fact that you have to have a certain psychological mindset, a certain motivation to be able to do the job effectively.
Yes, you have to be nice to everybody you meet, but you have to be willing to kill everyone you meet. You do. Yeah. You have to know when I never let anyone get this close to me.
That's rule 14 of gunfighting.
And the other thing is, when you talk about de-escalation and officers being scared, it used to be officers, we were trained that if I hit Joe like this, I don't want to hit Tom, he's wearing a jacket, but if I hit Tom, if Joe's a police officer and I did this, tighten up for me, Joe, and he did that, well, that was my key to do everything in my power as hard as I can to take Joe to the ground, to take this suspect to the ground. That included hitting him in the shoulder with a flashlight. That included now backing up and tasering. Whatever I had to do, that was on. Hey,
once I resisted, once I showed resistance.
Any type of resistance. Well, exactly. Now what do officers do? Well, if I touch Joe, the police officer, like that, what do they do now? Well, they play tit for tat. They go a little bit, and a little bit. Instead of officers just getting the job done, or backing up and calling back up, they sit there and play pity pat with these suspects. Perfect mine is the case in Michigan where the officer shot the guy that grabbed his taser and he was on top of him, shot him in the back of the head. If you watch that video, you can see it escalating. First of all, on a traffic stop, this is to you young officers. Anytime a door opens on your prospective traffic stop, nothing good comes from open doors. You know there's going to be trouble. The minute that door opened, he should have been on the calling back up. But the guy, if you watch the video, you maybe can screen it while you're doing this video, but you watch it, you can see that officer not doing everything in his power to knock him down. He's sitting there going, oh, well, if you're gonna push a little, I'm gonna push a little. You're gonna push more, I'm gonna push more. And they're matching him this for that. Well, you shouldn't do that.
Because it gives a tactical advantage to the person.
Exactly. The longer that fight goes, the more tactical it is.
Yeah.
And officers are afraid to not fight fair. And I always say, if you're fighting fair, you're doing it wrong. But in most cases, officers, once that door opened, he should have been on there, hey, I need backup.
What do you think it is that is occurring in law enforcement in general, and maybe at the Houston Police Department specifically, that is causing that mindset to sink in?
The attitude that the suspect's safety is more important than the officer's safety.
Well, how often do you think officers in general, patrol officers, I'm talking about patrol officers, because that's what I was, that's what you were.
That's what I was too.
On a weekly basis are threatened.
Remember, patrol is the backbone of a spineless department. I'm kidding.
On a weekly or monthly basis, how often would you say patrol officers are threatened with termination, suspension, or indictment in any kind of given context about policies that come out from the command staff and training that you have to go through, either whether it's mandatory training or it's elective training, where patrol officers are told, what horrific consequence they're going to get if they make a mistake or if they do a particular thing. For example, right now, you can't make contact with someone's neck. Like if you're fighting with a suspect and you come into contact with their neck, you have to do a whole report now and you get investigated because you came in, which when I was a patrol officer, you would grab someone around their neck and take them to the ground and handcuff them.
Yeah, we should be trained that, yeah.
And now if you touch someone's neck, it's automatically seen as excessive force, which I think is an overreaction to what we all know was the George Floyd incident, which is just asinine. But How much of that do you think has infected patrol officers?
I think when you're in the heat of the moment, you don't think about it. But I mean, I've seen officers in gunfights make sure their camera's on. You know, is my camera on? You know, I've been guilty of that too. Here I am running somewhere. I got to make sure my camera's on. You know, been in the chase. Is my camera on? You know. So yeah, you worry about that, and I think in the heat of the moment,
does that create a weakness with police officers?
It definitely creates a disadvantage. I mean, anything can happen, and while you're looking for that, and our officers aware of the camera. I think as we went on, I think the citizens and officers both kind of forget it's there. You know, I've seen officers do some crazy stuff on camera, going, "Oh my God, are you really doing that on camera?" You know, and we've reported them, and they've gotten in trouble for it, and I've seen it. You know, I've seen officers violate Fourth Amendment rights right in front of me, and you do realize there's a camera on, you know, we have to do this, and we would take appropriate action and go that route. Yeah, I think they're aware of it, and I think again, it's this somewhere along the line, suspect safety became more important than officer safety.
But do you
citizen
think?
Safety.
I guess what I'm trying to ask is, do you think that's part of the problem?
That's a big part of the problem. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to hurt this guy. In fact, the other day I was watching a shooting on YouTube, police shooting, and one commenter said they told him 232 times. The guy went back and counted. Get a life, dude. But he went back 232 times. That officer told the guy to drop the bottle before he shot him. 232 times before he finally shot him. The guy came at him with a broken bottle. But he told him, and if it takes 500 times and he drops it on the 500 time, fine. But you're telling him 232 times to drop the bottle?
He's not going to drop it on the 500.
He's not going to drop it within 5
time. It's just not going to happen.
It's not going to happen.
We're talking about de-escalation here. And one point that we've tried to make is some people will not de-escalate.
No, they can't. De-escalation only
They don't intend to de-escalate. They intend to make you do whatever you're going to do.
Well, I've always contended that some suspects are trying to achieve a tactical advantage over the officer. And as the department demands more and more of their officers to try to de-escalate, what they're actually doing is giving the suspect the opportunity to gain a tactical advantage over the officer.
I was working North Shepherd one night, and I get a call. And I pull up on the call, 5500 DeSoto, everybody's favorite complex, car sitting like this, doors open.
Y'all go ahead, I got to pee.
I look over. There's a black female sitting on the staircase, and there's 2 guys with her. There's a 6'6" black guy standing there. He's the suspect. I didn't know it at the time. I have a flashlight and I have a nightstick. And that's where I carried in my, anybody knows patrol cars, there's this, you can stick it between the driver's seat and the passenger seat. Well, I always kept my flashlight here and my nightstick here. Usually a flashlight was enough. This particular officer, this particular guy saw me coming, put his cigarette down, put his beer down, took his hat, took it off, stood like this, bowed up and clenched his fist. I automatically went into a silent rage because I knew something was going to happen. I set myself.
Yeah.
I went to grab my flashlight. When I saw him do that, I instantly got angry. And I'm not ashamed of that. Now, violence requires anger. You know, anger requires violence. And I grabbed my nightstick and I approached him and I said, "How you doing?" The first thing I did was I hit him in the solar plexus. I jabbed him, came back behind, gave another move and jabbed him in the back, smashed his face off my knee and put him on the ground and handcuffed him. And I said, "Don't move. Do not move." Searched him. He's not moving. I walk up to her. I said, "Is he your problem?" She said, "Yeah." I said, he goes, my keys are in his pocket. I grabbed her keys. Said, "These your keys?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "Okay." Got him in the car, went back to those 2 guys. I said, "What did you see?" He said, "Officer, he was ready to try to fight you." I said, "Let me have your ID. I'm going to need you for a witness." But I relayed that story to a sergeant, the sergeant of mine at the time. I was working 7P to 5A. And he said, "Why did you do that?" And I said, "It's in the report." He said, "Why'd you hit him?" And I said, "Well, because we use intermediate impact weapon. I had to tell you about it."
Yeah.
Read the report. And he goes, "Well, you hit him for no reason." Let me say that again. He said, "I hit him for no reason." I said, "Did you just not hear what I told you? Did you not read my report?" I said, you need to read the report. That's called a clue that guy wanted to fight me.
Well, so I guess this sergeant was expecting
the sergeant was expecting me to let that guy make the first move. Well, that fight had already started before I ever got out of the car. And that's where officers, too, the department is making mistakes, is they're not letting officers accept clues what violence is. If someone walks up to you, past your line, I call this the safety zone. Anything once I put my hands on you, then you're too close and I'm going to knock you back, do what I have to do. But if a suspect clenches his fist and the officer tasers him or nightsticks him or knocks him down, all of a sudden the officer's wrong. Well, why is he wrong? Do we have to wait till they hit us first? And that's pretty much what officers are waiting on. A lot of officers are waiting on.
Do you think that inculcation of anxiety, or I guess, do you think it creates anxiety in officers that they have to wait to get hit first?
I think that's what it's coming to, yeah.
And do you think that has caused officers to be reluctant to want to confront violent suspects?
Yeah, because they don't want to get in trouble.
And
also,
is that what leads to violent suspects running the streets instead of the officers?
It does. Look how these suspects talk to officers. I mean, I grew up in the 70s, and you didn't say anything to HPD, but yes sir, no sir. Again, I'm glad that guard is gone too. I don't think anyone should get assaulted because they're insulting officers. In fact, I would tell my officers, this uniform and badge is impervious to insults. Remember, when you arrest somebody, you're going home to smell bacon and eggs. They're going to jail to smell ass and feet. Okay, so remember that.
Yeah.
They have to respect us. We don't have to. We have to respect them. They don't necessarily have to respect us. And you cannot be insulted. You cannot have hurt feelings when you're in this uniform. And I live by that.
Okay, so I understand that idea, but I also grew up in Houston in the 70s and the 80s. And what I noticed different today than when I was growing up here is the fact that if an officer asked someone to do something, they did it, as long as it obviously wasn't excessively ludicrous or something. But if, for example, something as simple as driving around an accident, right? And you have to close off certain lanes. When I would watch my parents drive around, everyone would line up into the left lane and try to make their way around the accident. Now you have assholes who just try to drive through between the fire truck and the ambulance to try to get around or get through the accident and just completely ignore the officer telling them to stop as they're driving.
Exactly. And also society's accepted the fact that you can breach authority. That goes back to fathers in the home. These people are growing up with no authority figures. Whether you live in the home or not, you're still a father. You're still a dad, and you still should have authority over your children. And I think now society accepts the fact it's okay not to tell a cop you don't have to listen to him. I got a cell phone, I can do what I want. Well, no. Also, too, when you tell someone to comply, if you would just comply, there would be no trouble. And folks, let me tell you this. If you comply, go to Walgreens and get you a big dose of compliance, okay? If you comply, 99.99999% of the time, you will walk out of any police encounter injury-free for you and the officer. So they don't do it. They don't believe it. People don't want rules now. They want special rules. Well, I want special rules. I want to be able to run from the police, shoot at the police, pretend I'm shooting at the police and get shot, and then have my family complain about it when I'm dead.
Well, see, I think that's a leadership issue, though. So, for example, and I'm just going to give this example, is the Derek Chauvin case and George Floyd, right?
Yeah.
That officer, believe it or not, was doing exactly what he was trained to do, putting his knee at the base of the neck where the shoulder and the neck connect, which is actually where his knee was.
We were taught that too, to put it on the back though.
Yeah. Well, that's what he did.
Yeah.
And so in the medical examiner's report, there is no evidence that Chauvin compressed the carotid arteries in George Floyd's neck that would have caused asphyxiation. So none of George Floyd died from respiratory collapse.
Yeah.
He did not die from blood flow restricted by his jugulars being compressed by the officer's knee. We know that. Yet we still have this officer in prison on murder.
Yes.
And I think part of it, not all of it, but part of it stems from the fact that nobody in law enforcement in any leadership position in the state of Minnesota came forward and said he did what he was trained to do. Floyd had fentanyl in his system. He had enough to kill 3 people in his system. And he died from respiratory collapse as a result of fentanyl overdose. And this officer did exactly what he was trained to do. It may be ugly, but that's what they do. When you start a fight with an officer, and people ignore the video where George Floyd kicks one of the officers in the chest with both feet while he's in the back seat of the patrol car. They're trying to put him in the back seat, and they roll him backwards to try to pull him out. And as they're doing it, George Floyd rolls back and puts both of his feet into the chest of the officer opposite him and knocks him back. And that's why they yank him out of the back seat and put him on the ground.
Yeah. Well, I always say about policing, it's like making it's like sausage. Everybody likes sausage. No one likes to see how it's made.
Exactly.
And that's what policing. We are the bullies of society. We do what people are afraid to do or can't do, don't want to do. That's why they call us to handle their problem.
And I think that case will do more. That case will do more to destroy law enforcement in this country than any other case.
Well, that's probably what they wanted.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
You know, we don't do use of force reports because we want to report force. We do use of force reports because we want less use of force used. In fact, when use of force first came out, officers were saying, now it's pretty good. I mean, you know, they streamlined it and things like that. And I like people being held accountable. But one thing is, officers would say, hey, Sarge, I had on a felony stop, they would say, or any suspect, they would say, oh, I had my gun pointed at the ground. So I would go to roll call and I would say, do not let the political atmosphere of today or force reporting stop you from doing your job and doing it right. We do not do felony stops with our guns pointed at the ground. You point the gun at the suspect, you say what you did, and you take care of it. Do not do that. And don't let this political atmosphere stop you from going home.
Okay.
The busiest district in the city, 17 district, Friday and Saturday nights, I was the only sergeant. I wasn't only the desk sergeant, I was the patrol sergeant too. I was the only sergeant there, me and a tax sergeant. But he was on a separate channel. He tried to listen. I said, Greg, can you at least try to listen to the station? He said, I'll try, Rob. He's a good guy too, real good sergeant, you know. But two officers, the female and the male officer, they're fighting over a gun, the officer's gun, and I hear screaming.
Well, hold on, wait. Where were they? Were they en route to a family violence?
They were at a disturbance call. I don't know exactly what the call was, but it was a disturbance call with the suspect.
Okay, so there's a male suspect.
Male suspect got the officer on his back.
And so the male officer and the male suspect are fighting.
They're fighting.
Okay.
And he's on the air. He says he's getting my gun. This officer has since promoted and became sergeant. He's a real good guy too, but he's little. He's about 5 foot nothing, 100 nothing, zero athletic ability. Right? He's a Rudy. But he gets down. Well, the female officer's there, and I hear screaming. Well, anytime I hear screaming or anything, I would say 1701, clear the air. Clear the air. And I said, that unit, what do you have? And that guy gets on, the officer manager to say, he's getting my gun. The female officer's still screaming. And I said, that unit, calm down. Everybody be quiet, calm down. And I said, take your gun out of your holster. She does. I said, find a spot on that suspect. I'm going to count to 3, and if he doesn't let go of that gun, I want you to pull the trigger. Silence. I mean, everyone is like, holy hell, what's going on, and quiet. And I said 1 and 2, and by that time, units were arriving and said, suspect seen under control. And she said, Sarge,
at least the suspect was monitoring the radio.
I think so. I think he was listening to the radio more than they were.
They're going to shoot me on 3.
Good officers. They're both good officers. In fact, this young female worked with another female, and I work Southeast Jail, and I'll be damned if they didn't bring at least a suspect a night in every night I worked. They brought suspects in all the time. They're 2 female officers, little Hispanic officers, and not that has anything to do with it, but I mean, they were little. They were both weighed about 100 pounds, about 5 foot tall, but they worked. And she was a working officer. She just, sometimes you panic. You just got to say, hey, shut up, get in the game. And she said, I get out there and she said, Sarge, if you'd have said 3. And I said, well, I should have said 1, 3, but I didn't. I counted to 3. But maybe I think that suspect did hear that. Honestly, Joe, I think he heard, damn, this dude ain't playing. He's calling shots over the radio.
Was dispatch listening?
Everybody was listening. I think God was listening.
What did dispatch say?
Just, are you okay? Everybody okay? Command center called, are you okay? I said, no, what, he got killed? He said, we're all waiting on 3, Rob. I said, I know, but it didn't happen.
The command center calls it, are you insane?
Yeah. Hey, you don't have to be there to do something,
Hey, yeah.
Well, one night we had a chase and a guy's calling out left and right on the radio. And I'm at the desk. And I said, we can't see left and right. And he said, well, you want to come running? I said, I'm at the desk. I can't do anything. I can't push my chair that fast. And I said, which way you going? I said, he goes, I'm on Antoine. I said, okay, have you crossed 290? He said, yes. Well, that means, I said, what's the next street? He said, Hammerly. I said, okay, you're heading south on Antoine. Now, if you figure it out from here, left and right, And he ended up, it's funny, he caught the guy, and we're all, for those of you that don't know, after work, all the officers meet in the officers' workroom. When this officer came in, we all started cheering, because he finally got something right, But,
all right, so just in a minute or less, I guess, how would you sum up your career at the Houston Police Department?
It was fantastic. It's the greatest job in the world, and I wouldn't change anything. One thing about me that I was told also, I wasn't a yes man. I would call bullshit when it was bullshit. Sometimes I paid for it, sometimes I didn't. But overall, it was a great experience. I think the citizens of Houston, they love us. And contrary to popular belief, I think that's for everyone. I think that police overall in this country are loved more than hated. I say it's about 90-10. And because you only see the 10% that they only show the hate towards cops, they don't show the love towards cops. And there's a lot more that love us than don't. Mm-hmm. And I'll say one more thing that I learned. Just because you have that badge, it doesn't mean you're better. Just because you have that badge, you have to be better. We have to be better because we wear that badge. We're not better because we wear it. We have to be better because we wear it.
Okay, I'm with you.
And I'm with that. And I think that it's the greatest job in the world. And I encourage anyone, even in today's society, to still be a police officer.
All right. Awesome. Well, Sergeant Clasen, thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
I hope we get to come back, Tom. I'll dress better. Joe's wearing shorts, by the way.
Bust me out. He usually wear a T-shirt on the head.
Tom's not wearing pants.
Yeah. All right. We'll see y'all next time in the next video. Thank you. Subscribe and hit the like button. We appreciate it.